So first off, thank you for joining us for our first ever Loden Sports Outlier Session. My name is Matt Pajak. I'm a co-founder of Loden Sports and joined alongside by DC Arendas of The Greatest Champion. We're excited to bring you this series over the course of the next 5 weeks. We have a number of exciting guests lined up. Let's take a look at our upcoming lineup, which we've posted in our blog, and set those calendar reminders so you can join us right here in our Discord to learn from and interact with our friends. You may be wondering what exactly we're doing here. So, of course, here's a brief plug of what our business is. Loden Sports is the affordable human performance data provider. We use non-exclusive, objective athletic evaluations for the purposes of tracking athletic development, informing athlete health, and identifying outliers. Our evaluations are non-sport, gender, skill level, or age specific. They are for anyone and everyone, just like these outlier sessions. If you're interested in learning more or getting in touch, visit our website at lodensports.com, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Loden Sports, and read our blog, which is also available through our website. The Outlier Sessions have been created as a way to bridge the gap and create a connection between the aspiring, which are the young athletes, and the achieving, which in this case would be Corbin Carroll. All of our guests have a niche at the highest levels of baseball and are an outlier in their own right. And we want to take some time to talk about long-term athlete development, LTAD, in the context of their experiences, their processes for taking care of themselves, and get to know a little bit more about their personal interests as well. We want you to get to know our guests, pretty much. With all that being said, we know there are so many other ways you could be spending your time, and we want to thank you for being here with us. We hope you enjoy the Outlier Sessions. We hope you find value in them. We hope you're able to take something you learn and apply it in your life. This session will be broken up into 2 parts. For the first part, we have a series of questions for our guests, and for the second part, we'll invite you all to enjoy or to join in on the conversation. And when we get there, we'll walk you through exactly how to do that. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the pride and joy of Seattle's Lakeside School, 16th overall pick in the 2019 MLB draft by the Diamondbacks, top prospect in the game today, and an overall exceptional human being. There's no better way to kick this off. Corbin Carroll, thank you for finding some time this evening to join us.
Thank you. And thank you guys all for tuning in.
Sweet. So do you want to just start off and provide a little background on yourself? You know, how old you are, where you're from, high school travel ball award, any kind of background?
For sure. So currently 21 years old. Like Matt said, from Seattle, Washington. And I spent my whole childhood here, growing up kind of Magnolia, Queen Anne area. Also, like Matt said, went to Lakeside School for my high school experience from 9th through 12th grade. And then from there was committed to go to play some baseball at UCLA, where I intended to major in physiological science. And then did not go to UCLA, like Matt said, now in the Arizona Diamondbacks Organization. And so now I'll currently split time between Washington and Arizona, as well as our affiliates.
Awesome. So got to ask you, being from Washington, big Seahawks fan. Do you like the Seahawks? Are you in on all that? 12 man?
Of course. Not too much to cheer for this year, so maybe a Cardinals fan this year, but growing up for sure. Seahawks. No
relation to Pete Carroll.
Exciting. Uncle Pete?
Yeah. Have you ever gotten that one before?
I have a couple times, not too often, but
yeah.
I joke that he's my uncle. Spelled the same way too. I see a lot of Carrolls with 1 R, 1 L, but
yeah, I don't really see a ton of Carrolls. So,
yeah.
Anyway, what do you got on the Kraken? Are they more than just a logo?
I went to a game a couple weeks ago. My high school coach, he got some like a shared group tickets, and he took me to a game, and I'd probably say that it was my favorite sporting event I've ever been to.
Was that your first hockey game?
It was.
Yeah, dude, hockey's way different in person.
Definitely.
Just the speed of the game and everything going on, it's nonstop action. But
Yeah.
All right. I mean, this one's probably obvious for you, but I got to ask because I've been out to Seattle a couple times. Beautiful city. Obviously, I've been out there in the summertime when you don't get, it's like 2 months of not rain. So everything's really blue and green, sunshine and all that. But I didn't know that Seattle was a city built on top of a city. Have you been to the underground city?
I think one time we might have gone growing up, maybe like 6th or 7th grade. They've got like these glass kind of skylights that, right now they look like they're on the ground, but then you get underground and you look up, and it's just kind of a cool connection walking through downtown Seattle, and you're able to see that.
Yeah. When I was out in Seattle, the way that I kind of discovered it, was walking on the sidewalk, and there was like a sewer drain or like a draining grate on the ground, and walked over it and looked down, and there were people down there, and I was like, "What's going on?" Kind of freaked me out a little bit, but all right. Well, we can move on from the Seattle banter, but before we really get going, I do want to say that Corbin has graciously offered to sign a handful of baseball cards that we will be randomly giving away to our audience. So later on in the session, we'll drop a link to a Google form in the Outlier Session chat on your left. Anyone who fills out the Google form will be eligible to win, and winners will be contacted most likely tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. The form must be completed prior to the conclusion of the session tonight. And transitioning a little bit, we want to talk a little bit about LTAD, long-term athlete development. Loden Sports is in the process of building out an LTAD. Our guide will be an inclusive, holistic, and philosophical reference for developing athletes of all sports, all levels of aspiration. In our eyes, everyone is an athlete. Yes, that even means the parents and the coaches that could be listening to this session. A select few will go on to be professional athletes like Corbin, but that doesn't mean that we can't all find enjoyment in sports in a number of different ways for the entirety of our time on this planet. Like many of us in here, including myself, obviously not professional athlete, but there's still so many ways you can remain involved in sport beyond playing the sport. So let's bite off a key piece of one of the foundational elements of our LTAD, emotional well-being and the importance of gratefulness. There are little things we can do every day to bolster our emotional well-being. It's like a muscle, it needs to be trained. So something that I do for myself and with a number of people in my life is think of 3 unique things every day that I'm grateful for. This is something you can do today with us, and hopefully take a few minutes every day moving forward. So Corbin, spotlight on you. What are 3 things that you're grateful for today?
I'm grateful for everyone taking the time to be here, listening and learning, and hopefully being able to ask some questions and interact. I'm grateful for being able to go see my grandparents next week. It's the first time I've seen them in a pretty long time with the whole COVID deal. So I'm really excited for that and grateful for that. And then lastly, I'm grateful for the challenges that I'm facing and will continue to face in the future.
It's awesome. I'll hit you with my 3 before we keep rolling. A heater that works, even though it sounds like a jet engine, gets the job done. Power outlets and how they are strategically everywhere. Imagine if there was only one per room or per house. Definitely something we don't really think about. And then 3 different design elements in houses and buildings. Just kind of imagine if everywhere you went, everything looked the same. That'd be no fun. So, 3 things you're grateful for. And that's something, again, that you can do every day. It's something that we would encourage, you to do with a young athlete, or for young athletes to start doing on their own. Another part of our LTAD that I want to introduce here is the idea of ignition. The concept was introduced to me through Matt Pierce, a close friend down in Houston, Texas, baseball coach. He introduced me to the book Talent Code by Daniel Coyle, which for anyone in this chat must read if you're into development. Loden Sports looks at ignition as a key pillar to athlete development. So what is ignition? Ignition is what lights the fire for the developing athlete to want to participate in sports. What keeps that fire lit? Ignition happens in the subconscious through positive experiences in sports, and this is why the number one priority for a young athlete is to find enjoyment in sports. So parents, teachers, and coaches are responsible for shaping the developmental environment. Corbin, who could be one person, could be many in your life, help drive the interest in the sport of baseball for you?
So I think that was really two things, kind of two avenues. I think it was, like you said, people, but then also definitely life events, and kind of the combination of those two, I think really lit the fire. So on the people side, I'd say definitely my parents, definitely my coaches, my teachers, and kind of the lessons of discipline that I learned in the classroom. I think that was something I needed. And then on the life events side of things, I'd say in terms of baseball, rejection, being told that I wasn't good enough for certain things. I think that was a huge part of it.
Was that on the baseball field?
Also, yeah. In the baseball sense, you're not the player we're looking for. I've always been very competitive, and being told that I didn't stack up well versus certain other players, that definitely lit a fire in me.
You're that kind of guy that you face a little adversity and you fight back, you don't quit.
Definitely. I think I welcome it. That's something that was probably most taught to me by my mom. Is just that's how you go about business. Is you don't let the event be the thing that defines you. You let your response to that event truly show your true colors.
That's awesome. Who was the first person to put a baseball bat in young Corbin's hands?
Shoot, I don't know.
Was it a sport that was always on TV in your house growing up? Was it, how did you kind of get into it?
Just like any other kid, I think, really. I've heard, well, maybe not every kid, but I've heard some people, have these memories of as a young kid going to the ballpark with their family or things like that. But for me, it was more just the T-ball route. Parents put me in T-ball with all the other little Magnolia little leaguers out there, and it just kind of spiraled from there.
So do you think it could have been any other sport, or was it always baseball? So did you grow up playing other sports, or was there any urge to kind of specialize in another sport over baseball at any point, or was it just always you took to the game?
So I definitely played a bunch of sports growing up. Soccer was another really big one for me. Cross country, I ran pretty competitively through, I think, 8th grade. And then tennis was in there. I tried football my freshman year. Maybe not so much for the game aspect of it, but just to meet new people, going into a new school for high school. But I think by about 8th grade, I'd realized that baseball was the path that I wanted to take. My other main sport, like I said, soccer. Up here in Washington, the men's seasons are the same for high school soccer and baseball. And so at that point, a decision had to be made, but it wasn't really much of a decision. I knew in my mind that baseball was the route I wanted to take and stick with. And, I had a great time playing soccer. I have a lot of amazing experiences and, lessons learned from soccer. But in the end, it was always baseball.
just before we move on here, do you still follow soccer? Do you watch professional soccer at all? Do you have a team, favorite player, anything like that?
No, I was always a big Messi guy growing up, but I don't really follow them much, which is kind of a shame because we've got some pretty good soccer here in Seattle with the Sounders.
Yeah, have you ever been to a game up there? Isn't that like one of the best environments in the country for soccer?
Yeah, they draw a pretty good crowd. They share the field with the Seahawks down there at Lumen Field now. Um, Quest Field growing up, and then CenturyLink, but Lumen Field. So I think I went when it was still. No, I went when it was CenturyLink Field. And it was a great time. I want to make it out to Phoenix has a team now. I think they're trying to become an MLS expansion team, the Phoenix Rising. Those games look pretty cool.
Yeah, I feel like the last couple of times I was in the Phoenix area, I might have driven by that on the highway. It's kind of like a smaller park, isn't it?
Yeah, right down by Tempe, kind of 101. That off ramp you take to get over to the Tempe area, headed south. It's right around there, I think.
Nice. Well, kind of on the topic of, when you first kind of committed to baseball, eighth grade, and kind of felt like, that was the route you wanted to go. Let's talk about the college process a little bit. When did you first start getting looks? Like you had mentioned, at one point you had faced a little bit of rejection, and that kind of made you fight a little bit harder. Were you a smaller kid? Were schools on you right away? How many schools were on you, and kind of how did that whole process go?
So my first look started coming in select ball, and I played with a pretty competitive team where we had a bunch of players who were good at the time, and it also ended up, playing that they're playing a lot of them right now at some Division I schools. So the scouts were there, I'd say, summer after eighth grade year, but not necessarily for me. They started getting on some of those kids I played with that summer, but my more true college recruiting experience happened the summer after my freshman year. I know the rules are all different now. I think kind of that might occur a little later for a lot of kids, but yeah, that was my experience. I had, offers from mostly Pac-12 schools, and then ended up choosing UCLA.
What kind of jumped UCLA, to get on you? Do you have any idea?
What jumped them to get on me?
And how did you choose UCLA? What was the process with UCLA specifically? Because you said there are other Pac-12 schools on you. Obviously, yeah. UCLA doesn't really need to do much selling, but yeah.
So let's see. UCLA was a little bit later than some of the other schools. They came out. I'd reached out to them, I believe, and asked them to come watch me at some tournament, maybe in Arizona or California. And they ended up coming there, watching a couple games and offering me there. And I kind of got lucky because at that point I had already had a good idea of what I was looking for, just going through the touring process, meeting coaches at some of the other schools that had recruited me a little bit earlier in the process. And so actually by the time that our tour was finished at UCLA that day, I, kind of just looked at my parents and they looked at me and we just kind of smiled because we knew that was going to be the spot. They had a really great mix of obviously the academic piece, the athletics, and a great location, obviously.
Yeah, it gets you away from the rain.
Yes, that was definitely something to consider. But probably definitely the most important piece was meeting Coach Savage and Coach Ward and the people aspect of it. Just some really great people down there who, continue to, I think, push that program in the right direction. And I still follow them pretty closely. I think they might be posed for a big year this year. They're very young, but very talented.
Yeah, it looked like they got a lot of guys on campus, and the draft kind of spared them a little bit. So it should be really interesting to see what they do there with Cody Schreier, and looks like Matt McClain's younger brother is there now too, and obviously a lot of the returning guys. So kind of looking back on it, we kind of touched on the college bit, and obviously you were with a select program that did a good job of getting you in front of colleges. But do you think, your exposure to maybe the professional scouting community was a bit more limited being up in the Northwest? Kind of your thoughts on that?
So I feel like that's a tough question for me, just because I don't totally have, a comparison of this is what it's like playing in Texas or California or the Northeast, like wherever. I've touched briefly on it with, teammates now or friends I've made along the way, but in the end, I think the Northwest does have professionally the same resources as all the other regions. I mean, it's kind of broken down on the scouting side into regions, and each region has the area scout, and then a cross checker for Washington it'd be the West Coast cross checker, and then the national supervisor. So just in that aspect, no, I don't think it's totally different from anywhere else in the country. If you can play, they will find you. I know that's a saying that might be somewhat overused, but if you advocate for yourself and get your work done and on the field, and then in the classroom, you can get your shot.
Yeah, and as cliche as that is, I think it's pretty spot on. I think it's getting harder and harder to hide if you can play, regardless of what level you're playing at, whether it's high school or JUCO, or you're playing, Power 5 D1, or on the lower tier D1 or D2 or whatever it is.
Exactly. Baseball's so connected, and the further and further I get along in this baseball journey, the more I'm realizing how just it's such a small world. Whatever coach you play for at whatever school, they've got connections, and that network is super valuable for you, because it lets you have other advocates besides for just the work that you're doing yourself.
Absolutely. So I think it's kind of a natural segue, talking about the scouting community, the college community. I know we have a couple kids in this group with DC's group, potentially parents listening. They're a couple years away from it, but I do want to talk about how impactful that high school junior summer is for the aspiring baseball player. And for anyone who isn't aware, that's kind of the big momentous summer. A lot of those kids are already committed at that point, like Corbin was. But for a lot of baseball players that have aspirations to potentially play at the highest level, getting noticed by the scouting community. Obviously, Corbin signed out of high school. That's something that you can do in baseball. Was there any one single showcase or tournament that you think really put you on the map for the professional scouting community?
So I got pretty lucky my junior summer. I was on the road a lot and invited to many events. And so I was kind of all over the place, and I felt like I really had as much exposure to professional scouting as anyone did. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that there was a single event or tournament that put me on the map. I think it was just kind of going through that circuit, so to say, just building off one event to the next. I think it just ultimately culminated in, a scouting perspective of this guy can play, this guy can hit, this guy's, plays with energy. And then probably the cherry on top was probably playing for the USA national team and being able to go down to Panama and stack up against, 20 of our country's best in 2019, which looking back on that was a pretty good team and a really good team. Lots of successful professional players, college players.
Not to cut you off or anything, but that team might go down as one of the best 18U teams, at least in my memory. Bobby Witt on there, Riley Green, C.J. Abrams. That team was pretty stacked. Jack Leiter.
I've got a little picture that we all signed at my house, and I was looking at it the other day, and it's like first round, top end college player who's probably gonna go next year, whatever the case is. But we've got plenty of successful people who took both routes, whether it was signing out of high school like Bobby or going to Vanderbilt and signing out of college like Jack Leiter. I think there's never one route. I think that's important to keep in mind.
So you kind of brought something up earlier in regards to that question. Was there any one tournament or showcase that put you on the map for the professional scouting community? And you didn't really have an answer for it, which is interesting because the way you answered the question kind of opened up a different perspective for me. Because I know, and you're probably aware of this, and you were probably aware of this as you're going through that entire summer, there are a lot of kids that are playing alongside you at every event that put a lot of stock in their PG ranking, their PBR ranking. They're paying attention to after each event. There's write-ups. Here are the guys who stood out. Here are the guys who didn't stand out. Is that one of those things where, like, as those things were being written up and, like, maybe after an event that you did really well at, they're talking about you, you didn't pay any attention to that, you didn't even see it? Because I think that's kind of an important thing to bring up here. Because
Definitely.
I think a lot of parents and a lot of players put a lot of stock in that. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the player. And that's kind of something
I do too.
Observing Bobby Witt, that's another tremendous example because he was at the top of the class coming in and he performed that whole summer. And, you've seen it. There was another guy up in your area your year who, after performing as an underclassman, really struggled through that important junior summer. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd say my thoughts, kind of where my headspace was at was, I'd see that kind of those rankings and all that and the write-ups. I would see it. And I wouldn't try and block it out because I knew that I had the head on my shoulders to view it in the right way. And but I think the big thing that I would kind of try to hammer home about this whole theme that you're talking about is that it's really important to not focus on that stuff and on the scouts that are there. And just try and view it through the light of getting better, because as a high school kid, a professional opportunity, it's either going to be there for you or it's not. And that just kind of plays out how it's going to play out. Like, just the only thing that you can really do is try and get better and focus on it in that light. As I'm playing against, some great competition. If you're traveling, if you're, playing versus high level competition in your home state, whatever it is, just view it through that lens of competition and seeking to find, the knowledge from your teammates, from your coaches of what helps them, and just try and get that little 1% every day that ultimately might be what ends up getting you that shot.
Yeah, I think that's really good insight. Just kind of staying within your own little bubble and not really, overly concerning yourself about all of these other opinions that don't really matter. Because at the end of the day, like, even when it comes down to the pro community, 30 clubs don't have to like you. It just needs to be one. If it's the college community, not every school needs to offer you. Again, it just needs to be one that likes you, right? And there's so much pressure on, these kids, especially, when they're in high school, to get in front of the professional scouting community. And, the guy that's from your area, he ended up going to school, and he's going to find his way back into the first round, and instead of all the pressure being on him in that junior summer, he was able to kind of get away from that and kind of get back on track. And we've seen it time and time again. One of the guys that you played with down in Panama, as an underclassman, he made that USA team, and then he didn't make it the next summer. And now he's one of the best players in college baseball. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head, in regards to just staying within yourself and, trying to get 1% better each day and taking it for what it is. Last question here, kind of on the showcase tournament, front is, if you had to do it all again, with how densely packed that elite high school showcase circuit is, would you add or subtract any events from your junior high school summer? Just kind of imagine that you're giving advice to a high school kid approaching their junior summer right now.
Yeah, so maybe I should just say this because they don't have, I'm sure they don't know, all the events I was at or what teams I was playing with. So I played that junior summer with my home state select team that I'd played with growing up. I'd made a commitment to them and had some good friends on that team that I wanted to spend that summer playing with. So I played with them. I played with a national travel ball group. It was called the Canes baseball. And then, so that was 2 select teams that I was playing with. And then kind of the event side of things was a lot of USA baseball stuff. It was a lot of, I ended up playing well enough at some of these events that I got invited to some high school All-American stuff. And so it added up where, I wasn't home probably more than two weeks that summer.
That's crazy.
Just yeah. And something that just kind of popped in my head about that was I'd forgotten about this, but that creating that schedule that summer was intentional. It was with the goal of, if you can't play, a summer of baseball and feel really happy about it, and regardless of the results, if you still have that drive after, that full summer of this is something I'd want to do, then you're probably in a better position to say, okay, I'm pretty confident that pro ball is something that can be for me.
So was that
because not all players are
you had with your parents, like ahead of that?
Yeah.
Just kind of like sitting down and being like, all right, look, we're going to put it to the test. Like, both mentally and physically, like, am I going to be able to hold up over the course of,
yeah.
Because it's
that was my mom.
Yeah. What you went through it's a lot.
It is. Yeah, that was mostly a conversation probably with my mom, and yeah, I mean, it at the end of the summer though, I'll say it didn't feel like a dragging long summer of, dragging my feet from this event to the next. I felt like I played with just as much energy in the last event that I was at compared to the first. I was happy to be there. I was really excited about all the new relationships that I had made, teammates that I'd been able to play with. And it just kind of, everything kept stacking on top of each other to the point where after that summer, I could, look myself in the mirror and say, I think that Pro Bowl is something that, if it's in my cards on the scouting side of things, I think I could look myself in the mirror and say that I've prepared as well as I can for this.
Yeah, and shout out to your mom and your entire support group back home for obviously, as much as it was for you flying all over the place, playing in all those tournaments and having the pressure of, being in front of the scouting community and all the rest. Like, it's a lot of pressure on them too. Obviously I'm assuming she probably has other things she could be doing in her day to day. She doesn't have summer break, so shout out to all the parents out there that
that's
make that sacrifice for their kids.
Absolutely, I think that's something that can get overlooked, and I've got one of the best support systems that you can have. I've just got such a great grip around me that support me in all aspects that for sure contributes to things. And then, the financial commitment aspect of things as well. Like that's an expensive summer traveling all over the country playing baseball. And I don't think that it's not totally necessary for every player. It depends on your situation. It depends on all sorts of things. It depends on the experiences that you want to have, outside of baseball, all sorts of different things to consider. It's definitely not the only way.
For sure. So let's jump out of high school here, and now you're in pro ball. It's the present. You spent the entire 2020 summer at the alt site, beating up on your own guys. We all read about it. If you haven't read about it, you can go read about it on the internet. Corbin Carroll lit up the alt site. You injure your shoulder a couple of weeks into the 2021 minor league season on, of all things, a massive home run swing. That's another one that, for people who haven't seen that, you should check that out. I don't think I've ever seen you hit a ball that far. There's so much to dig into here, and something you touched on before, and I'm really intrigued to hear how you answer this one. But adversity is a part of every journey. We all acknowledge that, but in the moment, sometimes it does feel a lot heavier when it strikes. And that being said, emotionally, how did you handle finding out that you were going to be on the shelf for the entire rest of the calendar year?
So the first thing was definitely just a feeling of what? Like when I walked in the doctor's office and, they took me out of the exam room I was in. I'd done an MRI the day before, and they brought me over to go check out those pictures. And, it was an MRI of a shoulder. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but I had no idea what I was looking at. And he starts pointing around. Dr. Waz is his name. Dr. Waz starts pointing around at all these different spots. I'm like, okay. And then he points to one certain spot on the on the shoulder, and the Diamondbacks medical staff that I was with, he just goes, "Ooh," and it something was just not where it was supposed to be, like not even remotely close. And so at that point, Dr. Waz told me, like, look, you're looking at surgery, you're looking at X amount of months, and that was just completely different from the headspace I was coming from. I wasn't in too much pain. I tested it out a little bit, and it felt pretty good. Just moving it around. I just assumed it, honestly, if anything, it was just a little bit of inflammation. It was a little bit cranky, my shoulder. And and that, I'd be back out in the field in a week. That was where my head was at. So it was a very quick turnaround of realizing I was going to lose that full year. But I will say that there wasn't a lot of self-pity. I wasn't too upset. I wasn't too sad about it. I think a big thing that I'd attribute to that is just I knew I'd taken care of business to stay healthy and be out there. I'd put in the effort throughout the whole off season, not only with my work, but researching, finding the right people, making the right connections to be doing the right work and be working the right things. So my surgery was on my labrum and capsule, and a lot of my lifting program is centered around shoulder health and scapular mobility and health and strength. So I felt like I'd taken care of what I needed to take care of, and that really allowed me to stay out of the past, stay out of pity, self pity, and just live in the present, and think of all the things that I could do to be better.
Yeah.
So that was, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So that was great. I mean, I think coming into that mindset within probably the first 2 days of hearing the news, really allowed me to use this time to rehabbing to not only get myself back to where I was, but with the goal of bettering myself beyond that. That intent was super important to not just meet the bar, but try and shatter through it. So that was a variety of different things for me. That was, looking into wearable technology, sleep tracking, food tracking, nutrition, blood testing, blue light, looking into blue light stuff, eye training, VR tech, pitch tracking, creating my own lifting plans, and even using some analysis methods that I've been learning in some of my statistics classes, and analyzing my own hitting in a hitting analysis that now spans about probably 15 or 20 pages, and a bunch of just kind of messy Excel files that I've just been able to have fun with.
Which you still have to send me, by the way. But before we take a step forward, there's just so much to unpack in there, and I really want to just highlight it. One of the key elements to what you said was, there wasn't much self-pity, and really you weren't that bummed out about it and all that. And really what I think that comes down to, honestly, to a certain level, it's, stoicism, keeping a level head. But, it's a really valuable lesson for anyone who's listening to this. Is just, most things in life are out of your control. And in that case, what happened to you, like, that's completely out of your control. It was a home run swing, and when something's out of your control, this is kind of the second part that I really want to highlight, and it's everything you just described is the adaptability. It's like, okay, I can't get my next at bat, and I can't get my next at bat until the next calendar year. Like, what are all of the things I can start doing tomorrow that can kind of keep the ball moving in a completely different way? And I think those are the level-headedness when things strike, and kind of accepting that things are out of your control, and then immediately adapting to whatever your situation is. I think those are transformational, and they translate in all kinds of different parts of life. So really good stuff there. I do kind of want to, I know you kind of tapped into the, sleep tracking and the wearables. We'll get to that in a second, but you finished up your semester this morning. I know you talked about being in school, and that's something that I kind of want to fill in a little bit more on for the people that are in the room and the people that may be listening. What's it like being a professional baseball player and a full-time student at Arizona State, which Arizona is obviously where you relocated to for this year? So just kind of talk about that a little bit. Obviously that was one of the things you filled your time with this year.
Right. And I kind of lied. I'm finishing up my semester today and tomorrow, so I got a little exam to take after this, which will be fun. But I think.
Well, thanks for jumping on anyway.
Of course. But yeah, in terms of, it's a lot to have on your plate. Professional baseball, full-time student, and I guess the lesson that I hope that I can convey is that you don't have to. If you look at it, everything in total, it may seem daunting to some people to have that much on your plate. And there, there's a few more things on my plate that on top of that, but it's not about that totality. It's about doing a little bit more than you did yesterday in order to build something special. And so I was really glad I was able to do that this semester, this year. I think a lot of people in a rehab setting can lose maybe some of that drive just with the picture of baseball being so far out of the picture. But being able to work to build that work capacity this year, that's something that I really benefited from. And, my schedule kind of what it looked like was, it was rehab in the morning. I'd leave the house about 8, I'd probably get back 2:30 or 3, go back to the house, and be a full-time student, get all my work done. I'd leave for the stadium at 6, our major league stadium. I forgot to mention that I spent a lot of time with our scouting department and analytics department. So, after I was done with my homework, I'd leave for the major league stadium every day at about 6 and watch most of the game and then get home about 10:30. So it was just a lot to balance all of that. Well, I mentioned that one of my big focuses during this time was nutrition. So managing all that, well, 6 to 7 meals a day, it's a lot to get in, and it takes some extra effort. So, managing all that on top of the eating habits, on top of the sleep, maintaining other relationships within baseball, outside of baseball. It took discipline, and I definitely wasn't perfect. Every day wasn't, a perfect day so to speak. I didn't hit all the check boxes I want to hit, but in the end, I was better for it.
Yeah, my head's spinning from the amount of things that you got into a single day. And obviously, it's a conversation we've had in the past in regards to taking care of your body, and you were able to still get 8 hours of sleep on top of all of that every night for the most part.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, probably 8 on the dot.
That's impressive, especially for a 21-year-old, especially when you probably look around and you don't see too many 21-year-old baseball players doing what you did this year. So obviously commend you for it. The discipline, obviously there's so much to take away from that, but over and above all, something that all of us can do and kind of learn from that is live as deliberately as possible every single day. I mean, you talk about like doing everything that you did, and then you kind of talked about the food element, preparing meals specifically, and again, something we've talked about in the past. And I do kind of want you to get into it, not too deep, because obviously it's pretty scientific in nature, but kind of like coming up with that ideal diet, putting the right foods in your body, or the foods that some of the misconceptions you've had about other foods, but the foods that are right for Corbin. I think we can all speak to it. Whether it's my time with USA Baseball. Coaches, players, you think about that junior summer where you're constantly on the road. It's so easy to just roll into the closest fast food spot. And sometimes it's at 10:30 at night, and you need to eat, and you're not putting the right food in your body. So for you to be so deliberate about, schoolwork and rehab and getting to the ballpark and maintaining your relationships and getting your 8 hours of sleep, and on top of all of that, being deliberate about the food you're putting in your body, that's just another level for me. So I'm just gonna, go ahead and kind of segue right into that. Talking about.
And let me just finish off. Let me just finish off too by saying that, like, I'm not saying all this about discipline and routine to say look at me, look at all I was able to accomplish. It's more to say I was able to build up to that. If you'd asked me to do that a year ago, 2 years ago, no way I was handling all that. And so I just wanted to really make sure that, everyone on here who's saying, oh, that sounds a little daunting, or maybe even, oh, that's it, that's all he was doing. It's all relative to you. It's all about, where you are now, and, where you want to be, and just pushing yourself a little extra each day to, incorporate something else, learn a little something that, you can put into your routine that's going to just take you that one step further of being able to handle more and more things. And then you were saying on the food side, did you have like a specific question, or just was it more general what I did with that?
Yeah, I mean, let's just like anecdotally talk about it. I know we've talked about it in the past, and like you're very strict about your diet. Obviously we had dinner a couple of years ago. We went to a restaurant. Glenn was eating without his thumbs. That's a completely different challenge. But you're being specific. It's like you go to a spot and it's like, all right, like I'm not gonna have dessert. It's like, well, Corbin, like you're the kind of guy, in a peer pressure situation, but like, Corbin, you're the kind of guy that like you can have as much dessert as you want. You know what I mean? Talking about optimizing your diet, like I know that's something you've looked at extensively. It matters to you. Give us kind of the high level overview of what you did to identify what was best for your body, and again, kind of talking about the misconceptions that you might have on certain foods relative to your body specifically. Because I think this is an area that a lot of people don't know about, and I think it's an area that's slowly getting more attention.
Definitely. So you hit on something very quickly that I feel like is super important. And so I just want to throw this in before, and then I'll talk about the food side of things. But just that peer pressure, you threw that word in there, and that's definitely never been me. I've always been okay with, at the end of the day, I'm sure I'd rather be doing something with my friends, but if they're not doing something, if they're out doing something else, like I'm always okay being the lone wolf and getting my work done by myself. I think that's super important to make sure that you have that motivation coming from an internal place, and being okay with putting the same level of work in when nobody's watching, than when all the lights are on and you're getting commended for it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But so yeah, on the food side of things, what it's taken me to this year in 2021 was the blood testing side of things, and using that to become a little bit more specific in understanding my body and what I react well to. I've always ate pretty healthy. My family, I got lucky. They both my mom and dad cook, and they eat very healthy as well. And so it was always, healthy food was always something I was around. And then, from a performance standpoint, Um, I'm someone who needs to be doing everything in his control to be able to feel like I have the utmost confidence when I'm on the field. And so if I'm, throwing a McDonald's burger in after a game, I wake up the next morning and I think about it, and I probably even obsess over it. And so it's just been something that I've always wanted to focus on is making those right choices. Because I think confidence is the most important thing that you can have on the baseball field. And that's what, a lot of what leads me to mine is that my preparation process, and then, just everything that I've controlled, making sure that I've done that to the best of my ability.
It's really just no stone unturned when it comes to optimizing Corbin Carroll. That's pretty much what we're getting here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure next year I'm going to have something that I have not even the slightest clue of today, but just always looking for, a way that I can improve myself. So yeah, I'll just get into that blood testing stuff real quick. Cause that was the big thing this year, was there were certain foods that I thought, as being healthy. Eggs were a big source of protein for me. And so I did some blood testing, that it basically measured antibody response against different food types. With the idea being that if you have a high antibody count to any certain type of food, it means that your gut's not breaking it down as well as it should be, and utilizing those proteins and those good healthy nutrients in the way that they should be, and that it's having to create antibodies to break these food types down, just for your body to be able to deal with it. And so, before I'd done this testing, I was probably eating 4 to 6 eggs a day, right? That's sort of the source of protein, easy, not the most expensive. So it's just, in my mind, I'm like, great, I'm doing something great for my body. And then I get this blood testing back and I'm like, oh, that's not so great for my body. My body's having to create these antibodies, taking away, necessary kind of ingredients to form some of the other responses in your body that, promote healing, reduce inflammation, just to focus on breaking down these different food types that I was eating. And so realizing that, and then kind of on top of it, I think I'm getting X amount of protein per day from eggs, and I'm throwing that in my calculations of, how much I want to be getting in per day. Well, my body's not totally digesting it. So, that really true protein number is actually going to be a lot lower. So just all these different things. I mean, I learned so much from doing that. And, that was my big discovery probably from this year. And I'm not done with it. I'm going to keep going, next year and see where my new body's needs and reactions are at. But yeah, that was pretty cool to dig into this year.
So it's safe to say that when people talk about sports science, this is the kind of stuff that they're really talking about. And you don't really get a whole lot of that. In the media, there aren't really a ton of good resources for, a high school athlete or college athlete or professional athlete, to openly see all of this. You kind of have to go seek that information for yourself. So, I mean, just hearing about all that, I had a similar experience a couple of years ago, probably a year and a half back now, where, it had come back through some testing that, I had some allergies to some foods that I was putting in my body regularly. And, one of them was, citrus, like oranges. I was eating oranges every single day. I'm like, oh yeah, oranges are good for me, vitamin C, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was getting that inflammation, similar to what you were talking about, and kind of had to find a different source of vitamin C. So, that's a completely different level. without, kind of putting all that super microscopic level food talk. Do you have a favorite food to make when you're at home? And obviously you talked about like you grew up in a house where your parents were making meals. And when did you start getting involved in kind of the meal prep? Did they kind of loop you in that, teach you anything as you were growing up? I'm kind of curious because I think that plays a huge role in food habits as you grow up, is how early you were exposed to kind of preparing your own food.
So I make a decent amount of food growing up. I definitely learned it all from my parents. But where that's taking me to now is just knowing some of the basics. I don't really, I'll have a 4-month stretch where I won't eat out. Like I'll get groceries, I'll cook every day. And just, it's great. I mean, I get really healthy, nutritious food. I get to control exactly what's going into my body. And yeah, so from my parents, and what else?
Do you have a favorite food to make?
Oh yeah. I love seafood. Was always looking for some good, salmon or, shrimp, scallops, all that type of stuff. Yeah.
So you grew up in the Pacific Northwest. You have access to any seafood that you want because obviously, right on the coast. And then now you're living in Arizona. Has it been difficult to reach the same level of seafood, either in your kitchen, or have you been able to find any of that, out and about?
So it's probably not as high quality as Seattle. Very fortunate, like you said, to have a very good sushi culture, very good seafood culture in Seattle. But I'll go to the grocery store in Arizona and look for some wild caught fish. I think wherever you are in the country, there'll be like frozen wild caught scallops or frozen wild caught shrimp. There's definitely options.
Awesome. Well, I know that we're at just about an hour now, and we do have a handful of people in here that are probably itching to ask some questions. I'm going to hit you with one or two more things here, and we'll probably transition to that second part of the session here in the next 10 minutes. But I want to go back to, you being a full-time student, you're finishing up your semester this week. I know you have a favorite class, and it ties directly into one of the foundational elements of our LTAD, and we talked about some of this stuff earlier. And I think it really interweaves with a lot of the different things you talked about, and kind of who you are as a person. So I'm going to open up the floor for you to teach us a little something from your philosophy of happiness class. And just everyone, please check the Outlier Session chat. I'm going to upload, or DC might upload right now to the Outlier Session chat, a little something that Corbin put together for all of you to kind of reference as he teaches you a little something about the philosophy of happiness.
Right. So, yeah, when you and me, Matt, had that dinner in Arizona probably a couple months ago at this point, I remember, we talked about the philosophy of happiness class, and it was just such an interesting topic to me that stood out, looking through all the different classes that I take, and it wasn't necessarily tied to my major, but I just thought, there could be some pretty interesting perspectives to kind of tune into. I'd say probably my biggest takeaway from the whole semester, it was very traditional in the way it was studying like the Stoic thoughts, but it really reinforced the important values of virtue, of reason, and of action. And then probably my biggest takeaway was realizing that everything that you need to be happy you have right now. Because I think that's a lot of people can do, some searching, whether it's outside of themselves, in terms of people, of experiences, but just realizing that it truly is an internal thing, and that, look within yourself and realizing what are those things that lead to that happiness for you. I think it's just an important reminder. And then, so on that, I don't know exactly where it is, Matt.
It should be on your left. It should be on the Outlier Session chat.
Okay, hopefully this doesn't boot me.
Yeah, you should be good.
Okay, yeah. So I see that now. But yeah, that was just kind of a list of some of those quotes that really stuck with me, that I think were applicable to some of the stuff that we were talking about today. So yeah, just short and sweet, but those were probably, I did a lot of reading, different philosophers, from, the Buddha to like some of the Stoics that I was talking about. And yeah, that was just all sorts of good little tidbits in there. I think that not everyone's going to have the same takeaway from it that I had. That's part of it, right? It's how does it fit into how you personally think and operate, and kind of what sticks for you. So that was what stuck for me.
Yeah, and I think, I appreciate you obviously putting that together. And it goes back to, what we talked about earlier on, when we were talking about gratefulness and how it's a muscle that needs to be trained on a daily basis. Obviously for anyone who downloads that PDF and has access to what Corbin's put together, these are just ways that you can start to, pin that up somewhere. Read it, from time to time, and just start getting positive things in your aura on a day-to-day basis. Because I think a lot of who we are is really just what we surround ourselves with, type of information we surround ourselves with, and kind of the energy that people in our lives bring to us. If you're always talking about, and we're all guilty of it to an extent, like you're talking behind someone's back about something, or you're criticizing something, or you're watching the news or whatever, and there's so many different ways where you can easily get carried away with all of these negative ideas and you're putting them out. But it's really about kind of not doing that and really focusing on positive things and talking more positively about things and trying to avoid the negativity. And I know that sounds really cliche, but to the point of Corbin's class, philosophy of happiness, a lot of it is just, minding your own business, and, not being overly influenced by what everyone else is doing. And I think that all of that combined just does a really good job of kind of representing what you're all about. And that's just, you kind of do your own thing, and, you're pretty focused, and you're not overly concerned about the opinions of other people and what other people are doing. So, I think I want to wrap up, our structured Q&A with, maybe just something small that you'd recommend that kids can do to start forming good habits as they get older. I know you mentioned it earlier, everything that you're doing and everything that you explained that you did this year, it was a lot, it was rigorous, but you built up to that, right? So for the kids, whether they be 12, 13 years old, in high school, whatever that is, it's never too late to start. What's something that you can start with that's small, that you'd recommend to start forming those good habits moving forward?
For sure. So I think what I've discovered is that to have that, what you were talking about, to the highest extent, to have that truly special effort, it really starts with, and really comes down to finding what you love. And from that, I think it's a little bit easier to create the self-motivation, that internal drive to really do something special with whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be baseball. I'd say another thing that really helps with forming good habits is making sure that you're not relying on those external factors, just because it's not sustainable. Whether it's external validation, whether it's fitting into a group, whatever it is, just finding a way for that reason, your why. I think we hear about that a lot. Like, what's your why? Finding a way for your why to come from a place of selflessness. I think that's really important in creating those good habits. The group you are around definitely, I mean, no matter how hard you try, though, it is important. So just making sure that you're around people that do push you in the right way. That's always better. And then lastly, like I was saying before, just being okay being the lone wolf, doing what it is that you think's right, making those decisions for yourself. I think that's really important.
Well, we certainly appreciate you sharing all your perspectives on everything. Obviously, you're a great thinker, a great human being, and an example for a lot of different kids out there, again, of all ages, and not just an example for kids, but an example for anybody who might be listening to this. So, obviously appreciate you coming on. There's so much more that we can talk about. Maybe we revisit in 2022 Outlier Session Round 2 with Corbin Carroll. Obviously this was our first one, so hopefully we didn't mess it up too bad. We didn't put anybody to sleep. But last thing before we transition, and just a quick one, if you feel comfortable, is everything on track for a return to action for spring training 2022? Because we're dying to see you back on field.
So I'm going to refrain from answering that because I don't know when spring 2022 is going to be. At least I'm on pretty good track to be pretty good to go whenever that is next year. I think I just started swinging again. Pretty excited. So I'm getting there.
Well, in typical Corbin Carroll fashion, it's one day at a time and not getting too far out in front of himself.